Here's the highlight of the biggest stories we tracked for you over the course of this week. On the local front, the Nigerian banking sector's credit to the private sector rose by 4.1 trillion naira, which is an equivalent of 13.8% between September last year and September this year. The International Monetary Fund says the e-Naira wallet may function as a deposit at the Central Bank of Nigeria and consequently reduce demand for deposits in commercial banks. And now talking about bilateral relations now, the volume of trade between France and Nigeria dropped to $2.3 billion last year from $4.5 billion recorded in 2019 due to the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And now in the aviation space, the International Air Transport Association has clarified that it does not unilaterally determine the dollar-naira exchange rate used for ticket pricing by international airlines flying into the country. Japan's economy also contracted much faster than expected in the third quarter of the year, shrinking 3% as global supply disruptions hit export and business spending plans, and fresh COVID-19 cases soured the consumer mood. Tesla's CEO Elon Musk has also sold $930 million in shares to meet tax withholding obligations related to the exercise of stock options. In the United Kingdom, the British inflation rate surged to a 10-year high last month at 4.2%, setting the tone to bolster expectations that the Bank of England will raise interest rates come next month. It's now time to bring you special packages prepared by our correspondents. Now, the inflation rate for Nigeria in the month of October dropped to 15.99%. This is the seventh consecutive time we are recording a decline in the inflationary pressure. Details of this and much more is coming up in this report, which Lara Afolayan found.
The Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, increased by 15.99% year-on-year in October 2021. This is 1.76 points higher than the rate recorded in October of the previous year and lower than the 16.63% recorded in September this year. Increases were recorded in all the classification of individual consumption by purpose divisions that yielded the headline index. On month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 0.98% in October, 0.17% lower than the rate recorded in the previous month.
With this, it means that the declining trend for about 7 months portends a positive change or signal given the favorable economic conditions that the rate of inflation in Nigeria certainly will continue to maintain the trend. And so we're hoping that necessary measures will be put in place by government policy making body to maintain this trend.
The composite food index rose by 18.34% in October, and this was caused by increases in prices of food products like coffee, tea, and cocoa, amongst others. Food inflation for October on a year-on-year basis was highest in Kogi, Gombe, and Jigawa states, while Edo, Rivers, and Adamawa states recorded the slowest rise in year-on-year food inflation. On a month-on-month basis, however, food inflation was highest in Kebbi, Yobe, and Akwa Ibom states, while Kano, Kogi, Osun, and Oyo recorded a general decrease in the price of food.
Generally, in cycle production, once we have a trend, it becomes very difficult, except if there is a shock in the system. Otherwise, without a shock in the system, certainly the expectation always is that that trend will continue to be maintained. And so we pray that there will be no shock that will change the narrative.
The inflation rate increased by 16.5% year-on-year in October from 14.8% in October last year. The rural inflation rate was also up by 15.48% in October from 13.68% in the same period last year. The highest increases were recorded in prices of gas, fuels, and lubricants for personal transportation equipment, vehicle spare parts, and non-durable household goods, amongst others.
Inflation dropped to 16.63% in September, down from 17.01% in August, a development blamed on a decline in the food component of the Consumer Price Index. Lara Afolayan, TVC News, Abuja.
And now in this next report, the Institute of Directors of Nigeria say effective corporate governance structure and the public and private sector is key to achieving a sustainable economic growth and economic stability in the face of daunting challenges. confronting the country. The president and chairman of the council, IOD Nigeria, made this known at a press briefing ahead of the institute's annual directors conference in Lagos next week. Blessed Omonose reports.
Effective corporate governance structure in both private and public sectors has been the focus of conversations in many professional fora due to the critical role it plays in the overall success and sustainability of any business organization. These and other issues will be the focal point of discourse at the forthcoming annual Directors' Conference of the Institute of Directors, slated to hold in Abuja later this month. Addressing journalists at a press briefing in Lagos ahead of the event, the president and chairman of the governing council of the institute, Mrs. Ije Jidema, disclosed that the conference will serve as an avenue for stakeholders in the private and public sectors to brainstorm on key issues on leadership, ethics, economy and business, amongst others, as they affect the corporate entity in Nigeria.
We've made some progress in terms of corporate governance, but we have a long way to go. Since the start of Institute of Directors, we've done a lot in terms of advocacy for people to know the value of corporate governance, because when you just talk about it, people think you are talking in the vacuum. But if now that becoming aware, young entrepreneurs, beyond being registered as directors, now they realize that they need to put governance structures in place for the sustainability of their businesses.
However, reiterates the reserve of the IOD in pursuing the cause of deepening sound corporate governance practice in both the private and public sectors of the Nigerian economy through its numerous advocacy tools and engagements with all stakeholders.
We are trying to professionalize directorship, and then that is taking it a step further, so that you know that whoever you are pulling from our institute has what it takes in terms of knowledge, in terms of expertise, in terms of experience, and in terms of ethical standing.
As industry experts and other professionals look forward to this meeting, it suffices to say that a good governance system and best practices in all sectors of the nation's economy should be encouraged, as this is imperative for growth and development of the country's institutions. Blessed Omonose, TVC News, Lagos.
On that note, it's now time to bring you the feature on the show today as we take a look at the 100 for 100 policy for production and productivity. Don't go anywhere. Many thanks for still staying with us. Let's now deal with the crux of today's discourse. In an effort to stimulate the flow of credit to the real sector of the economy in order to reverse the nation's over-reliance on import, the Central Bank of Nigeria introduced a financial instrument called the 100 for 100 policy for production and productivity. According to the Apex Bank, the initiative is designed to create the flow of finance and investment to enterprises with the potential of catalyzing sustainable economic growth trajectory and also accelerate structural transformation, promote diversification, and improve productivity in the country. Now, in recent times as well, access to credit in the private sector has grown significantly, hitting an all-time high of 33.8 trillion naira as of September this year. Let's now look at all of these and much more, looking at the policy direction of the federal government of Nigeria, the CBN, and its focus on stimulating the business community in Nigeria. Joining me now to discuss this and more, I have the founder of MSME Africa, Sheye Olurotimi. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so very much for having me today.
Now let's start off with this policy, the 100 for 100 policy on production and productivity. It has received a whole lot of commendations and optimism shared. While some say they are cautious about this, especially with regards to implementation process, this remains the most important aspect beyond the launch. Looking at how the business businesses are also selected and the removal of bureaucratic bottlenecks. What checks would you like to see, and how do you see this policy pushing the drive for more job creation strategies and business sustainability?
Just like you rightly said, the initiative has received a lot of commendation, and I would also want to add my own voice to that, because it's not every time I want to criticize and say something has not been done wrong. So I would particularly want to commend CBN for the role they've been playing in recent time. CBN basically is meant to be the apex bank doing more regulatory functions, which they've been doing. But I also see them functioning as DFI and functioning to provide interventions, and that's quite commendable. Now to the area everybody's been talking about, implementation, which you rightly said. There is a lot of fear around town that it's not always about the policy you're putting in place, it's about the implementation. And I really want to toe that line. So how are we going to monitor this to ensure that the money gets into the right hand? That's what we should be talking about. Because I see us do a lot of things around here, and we're not talking about monitoring and evaluation. We get to hear about policies, interventions, but nobody comes back to us to come and give us figures to say these are the number of people that were reached, this is the impact on this sector. We hardly get to see that. If they've been doing it, I guess it's not been publicized as much as possible. So we need to look at implementation. Now to your question, talking about how this is going to affect job creation and what have you. Of course, when you pump money into an economy, what happens is that you deepen that economy, people have more purchasing power, and so the velocity of money within the economy increases. People are able to employ a lot more. So if I'm employing 2 people before, now I have 5 million, I have 5 billion. That's the maximum anybody could get. That means I can employ more, right? And so I'm able to employ more people. I take a lot of people out of the employment market. Right now, the unemployment figure is 33.3%. I believe with this policy and other interventions, we can actually reduce that figure to a very large extent.
Now, talking about the fixed maximum loan amount of 5 billion naira participants can access, knowing the initiative will be rolled out every 100 days, that's about a quarter, with a new set of companies selected for financing under the initiative. How much of an incentive or stimulus would you say this is for entrepreneurs, businessmen and women? And can the CBN really sustain this funding exercise?
Yeah, I quite agree that it's going to be a serious one. And I'm also equally afraid about the sustainability of this whole thing. So I don't have all the facts and figures about how long this is meant to be. And I don't even have an idea of how long the moratorium is meant to be, because I want to believe they won't be asked to pay immediately. So if you, let's say, for instance, each of the 100 beneficiaries gets the maximum of 5 billion, that's 500 billion in 100 days. So in another 100 days, another 500 billion would go up. So I'm not so sure that the guys who collected 500 billion now will have started paying when the others get what they are getting. I don't know, except it's going to be immediate payment. But usually in schemes like this, you give a room for moratorium where they don't pay back, maybe until after 3 months, 6 months. So maybe somewhere along the line, it becomes a lot easier when the early tranches, right? They start paying back. So it's a case of you are paying back, we're giving it to other people. But until then, it might actually be a bit difficult. Take it up.
Another big issue here we have to look at is interest rates. These have always been a major challenge for businesses in their quest for loan accessibility. Now, with this initiative, interest rates under the intervention would be at not more than 5% per annum, according to the reports. That's looking at it spanning till February 28 next year, while the interest on the facility would then revert to 9% per annum by the 1st of March next year. Do you see this rate as being fair enough compared to what we see playing out in commercial banks, and how much of a stimulant would this be?
Okay, I would say it's a good rate in quote now. It's good that it's below the regular rate of commercial banks. So, but usually any intervention from government agencies in Nigeria, usually it's between, the interest is usually between 5% and 9% for most loans from Bank of Industry and the other DFIs that are government owned. So 5% now, and then from March next year, it's going to be 9%. I think the government should just peg it at 5%, and that would actually make a lot more sense. I know there are things, there are a lot of probably other considerations, but I think it should be pegged at 5% for everyone who is going to be a part of this. So that, like you said, inflation is a big thing. So I get money to do something today, and then by the time I get to the market again to buy the raw material that used to be 1 million has become 1.2 million. And so by the time I take care of raw material, take care of other costs, I barely have enough to even service the loan. And so if the interest rate is high, it's going to be a lot of problems. So I think it should just be pegged at that 5%. And that would just be very fair, and it will be a lot easier to pay.
And now, away from this, looking at the overall business climate, accessibility to credit, data from the Central Bank of Nigeria, Nigeria's money and credit statistics shows that Nigeria's credit to the private sector has reached an all-time high now of 33.8 trillion naira as of September this year. Do you see this mimicking the trend that there is some growing ease in the ease of doing business in Nigeria today, because we're looking at non-performing loan rates as well?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because there are actually a lot of other parameters for determining the ease of doing business in a particular client. So the credit in the system might just not be a fair determinant of ease of doing business. There are a lot of things we also need to look at. Let's also remember that as at 28, according to a survey conducted by PwC, the funding gap within the MSME space was 617 about 617 billion naira. That was according as at 2018, right? The survey was conducted in 2020. But you would be surprised that 617 billion was less than 1% of the total credit that the banks gave out that same year. So what does this mean? Is that the banks are not lending to these small businesses, or the small businesses are not meeting their conditions. So when you talk about trillions of naira in credit within the economy, we need to ask, who are the people that these credits are going to? Are they the guys who actually need the money to do their business so that they can actually grow and thrive? Or the guys who have become so big and they are perpetual debtors? So if you're giving 50% of those loans to people who will not pay back, the big players, right? And of course, their cases are going to end up with AMCON and what have you. You're not doing anything to the economy. Let's give it to the real people who can turn it around, repay you, and will actually feel the effect on the economy. So the fact that we have trillions of naira in credit within the economy is not an indicator of ease of doing business. If you actually want to understand how much ease we have doing business in Nigeria, you need to talk to the people, right? You need to feel the pulse of the average business owner in the country, or even the average Nigerian, not just business owners. That will tell you how much ease we have doing business. And there are also other things that you need to look at, apart from the things we talked about. You need to look at access to finance. How much access do we have to finance? That's a parameter. We need to look at government policies and regulations. Have they been friendly? So in the last 3 days, you heard that the cost of prepaid meter is going to go up. That ultimately means that the cost of electricity is also going up, right? So every day you get to hear the news that the cost of a lot of things are going up. That is actually the actual determinant of ease of doing business.
Okay, now let's look at non-performing loan rates. How do you see us also silent in the sphere of non-performing loans? We have seen a big push in reducing this rate, and the CBN has been highly commended, looking at the fact that we have this rate now at single digits. In the space of credit risk assessment too, how do you see more criteria redefining the success rates of bringing down the volume of non-performing loan rates, especially for medium, small enterprises in the country?
Okay, so talking about non-performing loans, they are quite having so much non-performing loan within the economy. It's a big problem. And so for the rate right now is about 6.3%, and that's a single digit, and it's quite commendable. But maybe we need to look at why we have default, or why we have people not paying back their loans. Maybe that's a place to start from. Why do we even have non-performing loans in the first place? So when you talk about non-performing loans, it means when there is a default in paying back for a long time, usually maybe from 90 days thereabout, when you don't pay back, where you're neither paying back the interest or the capital, then the loan becomes non-performing. I know each bank and some financial institutions, they have their own parameters for classifying loans as non-performing. So one of the major problems why we have non-performing, major reason is number one, economic realities. When there is hardship in the economy, like we have in Nigeria, there is a lot more tendency that people would not be able to pay back their loans. So that's one big problem. That's one factor, right? Then another factor is high interest rate. When the rate is too high, and because people, when they want to get loan, they just want to do everything to get it. They wouldn't even think about how much interest it is. They just want to get the loan. So when it comes to paying back, they now realize that they probably shouldn't have signed that agreement and the rate is too high. And so they are not able to meet up that and the loan becomes non-performing. And of course, we have another reason when you have people who just don't want to pay back their loans. They are delinquent, and then because they believe that they cannot easily be tracked, they would not pay back their loan. But thanks to the CBN for some measures that have been put in place. And I believe that's the reason why we have a reduction in non-performing loan rate. For instance, we have the BVN policy that came into place some years ago. And that ensures that when you get a loan from Bank A, we can easily track you. And so with BVN now, we can track your financial transactions across all the commercial banks. So it becomes a lot difficult for you to hide. But I think we also need to aggregate all our data so that we can actually, with BVN, with your national ID number or whatever, we can easily track everything about you. That would ensure that non-performing loans also go down.
Lastly now, I would like to have your thoughts looking at the curveball COVID-19 threw on MSMEs, large corporates and the entire economic space globally. Now, looking at the fact that we have to prepare, some say for MSMEs today, in order to transcend and also get to that level of robustness we have large corporate entities, they have to think with the notion that a storm is coming, hence a plan A, plan B, plan C. Do you share this sentiment?
So I would advise MSMEs to actually, if you look at revenue and credit, you probably have a lot more revenue and cost. You probably have a lot more control over cost. You might not be able to have total control over increasing your revenue, or you can decide to cut down on your cost. And that would be my advice. This is the time to cut down on costs. You might actually want to look into your system and ask yourself, some of these costs, are they really necessary? So COVID came and a lot of things happened and a lot of businesses went under. But COVID also taught us a lesson. And the lesson is that a lot of the costs that we were bearing before are not necessary again. So the guy who used to have a physical office and was paying rent of 2 million naira per annum, now you find out that you can actually work from home. You can hold your meetings on Zoom and the world has not ended. You can do your business transaction virtually, saving costs on electricity that you have incurred in your office, saving costs on rent, saving costs on so many other things. So I will advise small business owners to cut down on costs as much as possible because you have a lot more control on your cost than you do for your revenue. Then, of course, I will also tell them that they need to improve on themselves. Try to do capacity development. The fact that you have passion for a business does not mean you know how to run that business. So let your passion meet with capacity. When you have passion and you have capacity, it becomes a lot easier for you to be able to make sense of your business. But if passion is the only thing driving you and you don't have capacity and then you also lack business sense, you just be seen doing a lot of things, but it's not making sense because you're not going to be making money, you're not going to be managing the business well, and at the end of the day, it might just be fruitless effort. So just running into cut down on your cost as much as possible, all right? And of course, develop yourself so that you can build your capacity to be able to do bigger things. And of course, also develop your business sense. It's not just about being a professional or being passionate. You should learn how to manage a business and manage it well.
Many thanks for your time on the show today, Shea. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's it from the interview segment. But just before we go now, here are graphic details of the internally generated revenue report at state level for the first half of this year, prepared by the National Bureau of Statistics. That's it on this edition. Many thanks for watching so far. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye for now.